Moving into our second part, we get this kind of the Green Knight has just left. Gawain has promised that he's going to meet the knight in a year and a day. And in order to get to the second part of our poem, where the Green Knight and Gawain are reunited, a year and a day has to pass. And we get this kind of commentary by the poet at the beginning of our Fitt2, where the story of the Green Knight at Christmas has become this kind of gift to Arthur. It's a story that entertains while the year is still young, while it's still new. I mean, you can imagine the hubbub that and the kind of excitement and the interruption that the appearance of the Green Knight and Gawain accepting this challenge has caused to Arthur's court. And you can also imagine that this is all people can talk about. They're waiting until the end of the year when Gawain has to leave to go kind of finish this game. So a whole year has to pass before that happens. So the passage of time, it's very beautiful how the poet describes the passage of time, and he does so in two ways. In one way, he describes it through kind of a Christian lens in terms of the liturgical year. The year of the church. And we go from Christmas, or the time of Advent, and then he says, and then comes Lent. And then after this kind of sparse, sorrowful kind of time of Lent, we go back into ordinary time before Advent can begin again. But anyways, that's kind of brief, and it's more of an aside. He spends the majority of that section describing the year cycle through seasons, this progression of time through nature. And what we can get from this description is that nature is this kind of this ever-changing world that sustains the human world, but is really unaffected by it. It pushes forward in its yearly cycle. And as much as you can imagine that Gawain would like to avoid this impending meeting with the Green Knight at the end of the year, nature is oblivious to that. It keeps moving, things keep changing, and so we have here this kind of picture of nature that enhances the superior power of the natural world, but in that it's both restorative because things are now green and lush and blooming, and through the autumn things start to harden and get cold. So we have this restorative yet destructive aspect of this spring moving into fall and moving into winter. And the description of the seasons kind of parallel Gawain's emotional state, or at least the emotional state of the people in Camelot, particularly his. In the beginning, in the beginning of the year, in spring, when the Green Knight leaves and everybody's still kind of happy and merry, and Gawain is still glad to have begun the game. But as time passes, when we get into Michaelmas or fall in September, it's kind of a warning that time is drawing to a close and soon he will have to leave. So there's that impending sense of dread as we move through the seasons and as we get closer to the Christmas New Year season. And once we get to this kind of warning of Michaelmas, and then Halloween happens, and then All Souls Day, November 1st, Gawain decides that it's time for him to leave and go and kind of embark on this journey. So as Gawain is leaving, Camelot joins collectively there's this feast and all of this kind of celebration, celebratory send-off. And I don't know as if that's appropriate. It's like, in some ways, like, he's going to, have his head cut off, and we don't know if we're ever going to see him again, right? Because he is not the same, he's not made of the same stuff as this kind of jolly green magical giant who can just, pick up his head off the floor after it's been cut off. Gawain is different. He is man. He is mortal. He will not survive a chop to the neck. So in some ways, this kind of celebratory feast, it's like a dead man's funeral, or what do they call it? Like a dead man walking, and it's like watching your funeral happen before you're dead. So there's kind of this element of, I guess, from Gawain's perspective, this melancholy where I see all these people that I'm never gonna potentially never see again. And the people surrounding Gawain have these kind of very different emotions. On one level, they are sad and concerned, but they make light of his plight, so says the poet. They kind of go around and dance and joke, and they don't really they're not really thinking about Gawain and never seeing him again. It's more of an excuse to get together and kind of party. So the cream of Camelot, and notice that phrase, the cream of Camelot, like the who's who of Arthur's kingdom gather around, and this kind of courtly committee of big names. And he name drops all these people like Sir Belvedere, Ewain, Eric, all of these people who would be known in the Arthurian community, all of their lovely ladies. And they all kind of show up to make a big kind of ordeal of this send-off. And I think I want to draw, I'll come back to what I'm thinking, but I want to draw your attention, or I want you guys to think back to the background video when I said that part of a romance is this idea of integration and then disintegration. And for a person to be found, they have to be lost. And in order to be lost, they have to leave the comfort of their society. Well, in this scene, we have this model of society, of civilization, of Camelot, that's been disrupted by the appearance of the Green Knight. And it forces Gawain to leave that social sphere and set out into places unknown and an unknown fate. And in some regards, he's going to be exiled. And if you think back to the Anglo-Saxons, what the being exiled meant for them, Gawain is going to be away from his king, away from his friends, away from his family, away from social stability. He's leaving behind all he's known to encounter this unknown journey, this unknown adventure. And in some ways, this excessive description of the decadence of court, the lavish feast, the luxurious clothing, as you'll see when we get to Gawain's description, and these kind of people who are seemingly aloof to the fact that, they may never see Gawain again. I want you guys to ask yourself what the poet's doing here. Are these descriptions of court life, of society, and the preoccupations with the external, and sensual appearance, what is he suggesting with this kind of description? And in some ways, is he suggesting that there's something artificial in society, that these people, that Camelot collectively has strayed too far away from the spiritual, and that they are too focused on physical or temporal pleasures. And I want you to think about that as we move forward in the poem. Is this kind of this comment on the artifice of society and social constructions and conventions like chivalry and courtly love, which we haven't talked about, but we will. So we get this departure of Gawain, and he faces it very stoically. He says that if fate is kind or cruel, a man must try. So in some ways, he's facing it, as he should, like a brave and worthy knight. And I think in other ways, he's trying to have that, facade of bravery. So anyways, after we get Gawain's departure, we get this description of Gawain and how he is outfitted for his journey. He is dressed in these costly clothes and all dripping in jewels and these white furs, and he's all of his clothes are white and gold. And he's got this shimmering steel and glinting metal, and essentially he's that knight in shining armor. He is that, what we have here with Gawain's departure is this ideal image of a knight. And that is further supported as we get to this description, this very long description of Gawain's shield. And we find out that his shield is scarlet and gold, and I will talk about the color imagery, I promise, just in a separate video, with the emblem of a pentangle on it. And if you can look in the background of this video, I have kind of an image of Gawain's shield here, and the pentangle is this 5-pointed star that is endlessly connected. It has no beginning, no end, it's never ending, it's limitless. It's like a cycle. It doesn't break. So it harkens back to this kind of Celtic or pagan imagery, and this pagan belief and honor and reverence for the cycle of life, the life cycle. But this pagan symbol of the pentangle was meant to protect against evil spirits. So, what's this shield do? A shield is meant to protect. But with this pagan symbol in this shield, we have these applied Christian beliefs, where they say it is the symbol of Solomon, a sign of fidelity, and that it suggests that Gawain is faithful 5 times over. He is as good as the purest gold, devoid of vices, but virtuous. He's loyal, kind, and someone who speaks the truth. So Gawain, as the pentangle suggests, is flawless in 5 ways. He possesses these 5x5 virtues that are kind of interconnected on each point of that pentangle. And on the outside, we find out that the pentangle represents Gawain's 5 chivalric virtues, the codes of chivalry, of brotherly love, purity, politeness, compassion, of friendship. He is perfect in all of his 5 senses. They won't fail him. His fingers or his hands, they won't yield in battle. They will never fail. This 5/5s, the shield represents the 5 wounds of Christ as he is crucified on the cross. So kind of that element of sacrifice in that shield. And then we also have the 5 joys of Mary, which are the Annunciation that unto her a child will be born, the nativity or the birth of Christ, the resurrection, the ascension where Jesus is taken into heaven, and then Mary's assumption into heaven. And because we have this kind of the 5 joys of Mary associated with this pentangle, it is fitting, or not fitting, I'm not sure, that inside of this shield is the image of the Virgin Mary, the one he prays to as he moves through his journey. I mean, he prays constantly to the Virgin, Lady Mary, guide my way, protect me as I go. So in some ways, it's taking this very pagan symbol and crossed it with this Christian symbol. And I'm going to talk more about the pentangle as a symbol in a little bit. And I'm also going to talk more about why the Virgin Mary, the kind of image of Virgin Mary, once we've finished and gone through the entire poem. But the suggestion here is that he is protected on his journey physically and spiritually. So on his journey takes roughly about 2 months. He leaves on November 1st, and he ends his journey, or at least the first leg of his journey, on Christmas Eve. And in a sense, his journey is representative of his exiting civilization, his disintegration of society, and he enters into the wilderness. And I want you guys to think a little bit about Jesus's kind of trip into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This is not unlike that. And he enters this, that was kind of a thought that I didn't think of until just now, so I won't elaborate on that too much right now. But this is all about him moving into the wilderness and being tempted by someone or something. And it's this, on his journey, he moves through kind of this strange land, this strange region. With dangerous terrain and harsh weather, frost-glazed earth and crystallizing rain, dense forests and mountainsides. And it's not, as it would appear, a very pleasant journey. And despite this harsh kind of weather, his mind is not on, oh my gosh, these are terrible conditions. His mind is on, or his concern is that he'll miss Mass on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So it seems that this journey in some ways has brought him closer to God. So anyways, this concern with it being Christmas and whether or not he's going to be able to go to Mass, it shows that he is a faithful Christian. And he prays to find some place to worship. He crosses himself 3 times, and boom, just like that, a castle in the middle of the nowhere. Gawain has kind of been rescued on this journey. And I want to mention very briefly that this journey kind of represents kind of the trials and tribulations that go on in life. And we'll talk more about that later. He's brought to this castle, and the castle on the outside is presented as this impenetrable fortress with a moat and all of these towering spires and etc. And it's kind of situated in these mountains with nothing else around it. It's very isolated. And juxtaposed to that is the kind of the inside or the interior where he's immediately welcomed. So you've got this kind of appearance of being unwelcoming versus this very welcoming I don't know, it's just, it's odd that we've got these two kind of opposing forces in this castle. He's immediately welcomed. We find out that inside the interior of the castle, they have all of these exotic furnishings. It's very decadent. It's very lavish. Beautiful women are running all around. And we get to meet the lord of the castle, Lord Bertilac, and he is described as being this powerful and large man with a bushy beard like a beaver, and he tells Gawain to behave as his heart pleases. He is welcome to whatever he wants. And in some ways, this is him being a very gracious host. But in other ways, this welcome is a little bit ominous because it hints at this sense of lawlessness or temptation, where he's saying, "Do as you please." That idea that that idea of danger, and so in that welcome is also this invitation to stay. And he is, we find out that Gawain has been heard of. He has this kind of renowned reputation as being a knight of Arthur's round table, that no one has ever bested him. And hidden in that kind of reception and welcome is the voice of the poet, and we basically get this sense of watch, will witness Gawain's gracious ways. If we listen, we'll learn the language of courtesy. And God has sent us here. God has sent Gawain so that we shall learn a lesson. So here, a lesson in tact, in manners, and if we're lucky, love's tender language. So here we get this reminder that we are supposed to keep an eye on Gawain. Gawain is somebody to watch. Gawain is somebody that we are meant to kind of model in behavior. So we have this Christmas feast, and I want to note the parallels to Camelot and Arthur's court. It's this kind of bizarre alternate universe where the same thing happens just at a different time. It's very weird because we get this kind of merriment and feasting, and lo and behold, an introduction to a new game, just as we did at the end of Arthur's Christmas feast about a year ago to the day. And so notice, I think that the same thing happening, just different in different years, is a testament again to that never-ending cycle, that endlessness, and things changing but staying the same, so to speak. In the middle of that feast, I just want to draw your attention really quickly to this. In the midst of this party, we get this introduction to these two women. The beautiful woman whose face, complexion, and body are more beautiful than Guinevere, and this really old, ugly, nasty crone, and this really beautiful parallel comparison of both of them, one young, one withered by years, one clothed in pearls, one choked to the neck in white silk. And these women are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, or opposite ends of the cycle of life. And this parallel description highlights these extremes. And these women will be important later, but it's important to note that in this part we have a view of the three varying perceptions of women in the medieval period. At the very beginning, when we were talking about Gawain's shield, we have the virgin, or the ideal, presented in the Virgin Mary. We have this beautiful lady who's described as very physically desirable, which means that she's this kind of sexually desirable temptress, and that she's morally corruptible. And then we have this complete non-desirable, the old crone. So I'm going to talk more about that in the next part, so keep that in mind. And then finally, we have this new game that is introduced, this new contract, this new challenge, where Gawain reveals the purpose of his travels, and the Lord of the Manor says, hey, I can help you if you stay a while and prepare for your journey, bask in bed. I can tell you where to find the Green Knight. And the Green Knight, or not the Green Knight, Lord Berkelak announces that Gawain has sworn to serve him whatever he instructs, and Gawain takes this oath. He says, you can trust my tongue in truth. I am your servant. And so temporarily, Gawain has found this new lord and vows to be faithful to him while also honoring his reputation and a knight of Arthur's Round Table. And the two make a pact. And this is the introduction to the new game, the exchange game, or you could call it the temptation game or the hunting game, whichever you want to call it, because it's all 6 one, half dozen the other. And the terms of that agreement is that Gawain is going to go to church, lay in bed, hang out with Lord Berkelak's wife, and while Gawain is doing all of nothing, Lord Berkelak is going to go out and hunt. Gawain stays in bed, and then at the end of the day, they'll come together to feast, and they get to exchange the day's earnings. So that's where we leave off in part 2, and I promise I won't talk as long next time. I'll try to streamline my lecture so I'm not boring you guys all to tears. So that's it, what we have. The big takeaways from this section are, of course, the pentangle and the 5 virtues, and establishing Gawain as this kind of ideal image of knighthood, and his kind of leaving and journeying into this new uncharted territory. And picking up, we're going to talk about courtly love and the temptation of Gawain. So stay tuned.